Welcome to everyone who joined us today here in person or online. I'm not going to start good morning, good evening, good afternoon. It's a hopeless. We don't know where people are joining us from. But nonetheless, it's my greatest pleasure to welcome you to a seminar by the Vienna Center for Disarmament and Nonproliferation. I'm Elena Sokova. I'm the Executive Director of the VCDNP. And today we will focus on nuclear security and the nuclear supply chain in the age of artificial intelligence. The recent revolution in AI will affect and has already affected many ways of our life, and the nuclear sector is not an exception. And you've probably heard quite a bit already in the media or scholarly publications about effects of potential effects of artificial intelligence on nuclear weapons, decision making, and other things. But we're going to focus on something that is more related to the civilian nuclear sector, and specifically on the nuclear power generation, nuclear power plants, and supply chain for them. Well, artificial intelligence could bring many benefits for this sector, including by providing better assessment of operations, many other potential benefits, but it could also provide new tools and new kind of opportunities for malicious actors to undertake cyber attacks or target artificial intelligence systems that are integrated into nuclear facilities. And nuclear facility is a facility that, or reactor even itself, consists of so many different parts. It's not even hundreds, it's thousands of different components that go into it. And the trend, as everywhere, is for incorporation of some of the new technologies into operation. But it's not only the facilities and reactors themselves, but it is the supply chain that is built into all the nuclear business. And today's seminar will focus on the intersection of these three topics: artificial intelligence, nuclear security, and the nuclear supply chain. And the reason for today's seminar is to present the report that Dr. Case Lackner and Mara Zarka from the VCDNP have authored on this topic, but it is based on a two-day workshop that we convened here at the VCDNP in January, and overall set of discussions, interviews, follow-up arrangements, and so forth. So they will present the report today, and we'll have a discussion afterwards. But before we jump into that, I want to first and foremost to thank the Global Affairs Canada for sponsoring the work on these issues, the workshop we had in January, the report itself, and today's opportunity to present the findings and overall the commitment to this topic and project. And I also want to extend the participants in the workshop and other experts who contributed numerous hours and pro bono reviews and interviews to this project. And before I give the floor to Sarah, who will present the main findings, I want to remind our audience online that you could use the Q&A function on Zoom to send us questions, and the audience here obviously has a privilege of asking questions without facilitation of technology. But with that, Sarah, why don't you take away?
Thank you, Elena, for that fantastic introduction. Thank you. Let me add my thanks to hers for everybody who is here today joining us during the Easter week here in Vienna, and those of you who are joining us online from various different parts of the world. So what I'm going to talk to you today is exactly what Elena prepared you for. That is, we're going to talk about artificial intelligence, nuclear security, and the supply chain. Now, I don't want to assume that anyone, either in this room or listening online, knows everything about all three of these topics. That's rare. It's very rare. Usually, if you have a nuclear security expert, they know some about the supply chain, they've heard of AI, but they don't know both in depth. And this is the truth for each of these different subspecialties. So we're really digging into something that is 3 times niche, but at the same time, really essential. So I'm going to start out with some background. And that background, let's begin with the first thing, which many of you may know, but many others may not. And that is, what are we talking about when we are talking about nuclear security? And what we're talking about, I'm going to quote the IAEA, who are the best people to quote if you want to talk about what is nuclear security. It has the objective, is what they say, of protecting persons, property, society, and the environment from harmful consequences of a nuclear security event. Okay, that gives you a bit of an idea. This definition comes from the fundamentals and essential, the Nuclear Security Series fundamentals, the objective and essential elements for nuclear security regimes. So this is the most basic definition that you're going to find of nuclear security. I'm going to sum it up a bit. You have a nuclear security event, that means something bad happened that is related to an actual malicious actor, whether it's one person, whether it's several people. Somebody did something on purpose to create a problem for law enforcement, a radiation release, a theft, something. And that's what we're worried about. So we're not talking about a hurricane. We're talking about people. That's important. Okay, so first I said we're talking about people. Now I'm going to say, okay, so we're all good. We know what nuclear security is. What is artificial intelligence? That's the next question. This one is especially hard. I've asked before when I've given similar briefings if anyone in the room can really clearly define artificial intelligence. I'll ask it again, but I'll tell you what, I'm not seeing hands yet, and I've never seen one. Not yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tell you what seems to be the most reliable, if still disputed, definitions of what is AI. First, when I say AI in the context of this report or in the context of this briefing, I mean a field of science. I don't mean ChatGPT. I mean a field of science that is trying to make a machine that acts in some ways like a person, that can reason, learn, and act in a way that, say, 15 years ago we would have said machines can't do. An AI system, this is important, we're going to talk a lot about AI systems, is a machine-based system, I like this, designed to operate with varying levels of autonomy and that may exhibit adaptiveness after deployment and that infers from inputs how to generate its outputs. That is from the EU Artificial Intelligence Act. You can see it was written by lawyers, but I think it gives you some idea of what an AI system is. It's a machine that has AI functions. There's some kind of AI model inside that is learning or acting in a way that we would have thought needs a person, maybe making patterns, maybe taking in visual input and figuring out what it is. And the AI system is, in a way, the machine that houses that. So if I take these two things I've told you about, nuclear security and AI, let's look at just those alone. We won't talk about the supply chain yet. What do we mean? What are we worried about? It's not just AI is some spooky thing that is going to come and kill us all. I want to be concrete. I want to be real about this. And the first thing here, we see that there are 2 real categories, very broad categories of risks related to nuclear security and AI. The first one are the security risks associated with an AI system that you've intentionally installed into your nuclear facility. And here I don't care if you mean the business side, you mean the operational side, you've put it in a security system. It's something that you've installed by choice to do a good job, to do something useful that's really beneficial, but that thing needs to be installed securely. And there are particular considerations for AI systems to be installed securely. We'll get to that. So that's the first. The second is probably what you all thought about immediately, which is broadly available AI systems and models. And here, yes, I do mean things like ChatGPT. That's one example of many others, yeah, that could be used to increase the capabilities of a malicious actor, of one of these people who are going in and trying to do something illicit, something criminal related to a nuclear facility or nuclear materials. So those are the two things: malicious actors who are using an AI and securing the AI that you're putting in to do good things in your facility. And so one question I've gotten a few times is, oh, nobody's putting AI into a nuclear facility. That won't happen. Oh, yes, it will. Yes, and it's realistic. First of all, let's begin with, as a field of research, AI started in the 1950s, at the same time as nuclear. So it's not new. And better, the proposed applications of AI into nuclear facilities dates from the 1980s, also not new. And I now have anecdotal proof because last week I talked to someone who was working on neural networks and nuclear facilities in the late 1980s. So this isn't something that's just happening now. It's been going on. But AI is not the same thing now as it was in the 1980s. It was a field of science then. It was doing stuff, that's correct. But now 3 big things have changed. And really it's happened in the last 20 years, you could say, maybe 25 years. Data. There's just a lot of data. I say cat photos kind of as a joke, but I'm serious. Cat photos made huge differences in the development of these AI models that we use now every day. Data access, how much data there is, how you can get to it, how freely it's all available, that changed. You need a lot of data to train an AI model. The AI models and algorithms have gotten better because they knew they could use so much data. So that made a difference. The methods and algorithms have developed further and have been able to profit from that. And importantly, science, material science, computational resources. There's the thing that everybody giving a briefing like this says. I know, they all say, you have more power right here than in a 1970 supercomputer. The ones that, I'll be honest, my father always used to talk about how we programmed them with punch cards. This is way easier. Big difference. We're not talking about what the kind of computational resources we had just a few decades ago. And so with that, there's many more proposed applications in nuclear facilities. For this audience, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about those many applications. I'll mention some as I go through. The important thing is there's a lot. And if you read our report, you can get a lot of examples of them, and we refer you to papers with even more. So there's a lot of possibilities. So why, with this behind us, why would we then choose to focus even further in on AI, nuclear security, and the nuclear supply chain? Well, let me tell you some things about the supply chain, which has also been changing a lot in the last 25 years. And I mean the supply chain in general, not just for nuclear facilities, but also the nuclear supply chain. So what is the nuclear supply chain? Nuclear energy production relies on a nuclear supply chain to provide products and services, including design, construction, commissioning, operation, and decommissioning. Products and services, that's important. So we're talking about components, and we're also talking about services. We're talking about contractors, subcontractors, software vendors, lots of things. Because again, we're not just talking about the operational side. We're not just talking about some fuel rods. We're talking about an entire nuclear facility, which is an industry and business operation with consumer electronics as well. So there's just a lot of things in the supply chain. There is a real risk from counterfeit, fraudulent, and suspect items. I want to underscore that. I said it loudly and slowly for a reason. I'm just going to pull out a couple of facts for you. There's a lot more of this also in the report, so please read. Over 60% of operating nuclear power plants in 1990 had or were suspected to have counterfeit parts in them. Let that sink in. And that's an estimate by the U.S. Government Accountability Office. These people are not just random. They think about this. 60% in 1990. And that was before the amount of counterfeit items that people are seeing every day really exploded. Today, up to 2.5% of world trade is in counterfeited and pirated goods. If we think that that does not affect the nuclear supply chain, we are fooling ourselves. And I've heard plenty of examples, some I Can't tell you, plenty of examples about exactly this, counterfeit items working their way into the nuclear supply chain. So what are we talking about? We're talking about AI, security of the nuclear supply chain, and nuclear security implications. So zooming in a little bit further to the real topic that we're going to be talking about. There's both benefits and there's challenges. The benefits, you can use AI to actually help manage your supply chain. That's cool. This is a very complicated problem. It can improve the efficiency of operations, strengthen resilience to disruptions if you know what your supply chain looks like a few levels deeper. So you source something from a contractor. That contractor sources other things from a set of contractors. Then another set of contractors. That's what I mean by a layer. If you can look deeper, you might be able to figure out where some disruptions are likely to happen, where you've suddenly bottlenecked down to one supplier who supplies all 15 of what you thought were separate suppliers. So you can learn a lot. You can also get from exactly this kind of mapping new and unique insights into risks. And there are actually commercial providers who are working on this. I've heard of American companies, Austrian companies. There are people working to figure out how they can use AI and freely available web information to map supply chains. That's going to be important later, so hold on to that. But it's not a bad thing, necessarily. Challenges. Okay. It can also introduce new supply chain risks, the use of AI, in the hands of malicious actors or in your facility. The supply chain for your AI integrated into the facility, if you haven't thought about it, if you haven't thought about all the unique and novel aspects, that could be a risk. That's mitigatable. That's manageable. However, you could also see the misuse of AI to support counterfeiting efforts, to make a fake operation look more legitimate. That is not out of the realm of possibility. So with that all as our background, we held this workshop that Elena already mentioned on the 14th and 15th of January 2025. Our goal was to bring together stakeholders from all of these small niches who don't always talk to each other, to try to get them to talk, combine ideas, and then we listened very, very hard on the basis of the expert research we had already done in this area, and on the basis of 3 expert papers that we commissioned. So we thought about this and generated the expert report that I'm about to talk about. So everything until now has been pretty much background. And now I'm going to get into a few slides. We'll keep them relatively short. But what I want to do is, first of all, set out for you this landscape of risk. And following that, the key conclusions in the report that are relevant for policymakers, regulators, high-level people in the nuclear industry, and everyone else who's thinking about exactly the intersection between nuclear security, the nuclear supply chain, and AI. Key elements. The first thing that we spent some time talking about in the workshop, but also thinking about very hard before we even convened the workshop, is integrating AI securely into facilities. So I just talked to you about 2 different sets of risks in a way. One is malicious actors using AI. We'll get to that. The other is you've chosen, for very good, smart, beneficial reasons, to put an AI system into or around your nuclear facility. You could be using it for a lot of things. It could be you could be considering it for predictive maintenance. You could be using it on the business side to generate paperwork. You could be using it, and we'll get to that, in procurement. Again, filling out paperwork. And a lot of other different things. Perimeter monitoring for a nuclear security system. You could be using it for facial recognition. So just to give you a taste, there's a lot of different reasons why one might want to do this. But putting in these AIs does pose new challenges for security. That doesn't mean don't do it. It means think about them. And some of these challenges come up in the supply chain. The important point that I want to underscore about thinking about this part of the nuclear risk landscape is you need to integrate AI securely into nuclear facilities from the beginning. When these AI systems go in, it should be done thoughtfully and securely as much as reasonably possible, and you should know the risk you're accepting, plus or minus. You can do this by building confidence that your AI systems will reliably function as they are expected to. That's an important step, this verification at the beginning. It's a little different from AI and other software tools, that there's a lot of similarities. You also need to analyze the novel aspects of your AI supply chain and address new challenges. A previous slide had the word data poisoning on it, for those of you who are looking carefully. That is when training data that is not right is inserted from the very beginning as an attack method, so that once in a while, but not often enough that you would necessarily see it, your AI might spit out the wrong answer. That's a problem. So these are the kind of things you need to be thinking about, the training data aspect of your supply chain and how you're going to make sure you've got that under control. I would also add things like if you have cloud computing involved, and we'll get to that later, that's another kind of challenge. So I don't want to give you a comprehensive list, but there's a lot of things you might want to think about when trying to secure this. Finally, clarifying the ultimate responsibility for actions from AI outputs. That AI is going to have an output. Generally, good practice, critical applications, don't let the AI decide. Keep a human in the decision-making loop. But humans can be influenced. And you need to think about who's going to have the ultimate responsibility for all of this. AIs are a bit different this way also from normal software, because depending on what you're using, that's a big, depending on what you're using, they may have a chat interface that feels human, for example. So, that said, all of that, you can do your very best, as with any kind, honestly, of security risk assessment. And you're still going to have some risk left over. So you just need to think about some risk will remain, and it needs to be balanced against the benefits that you're trying to get out of that system. In some cases, that will be a definite yes, and some a definite no, but that's a decision that needs to be made by decision makers and can't really be set out in advance. It's very specific. So I teased you at the beginning, but now I'm coming back to it, the malicious actors, right? That's what we're really worried about. Increasingly powerful AI systems are already in the hands of malicious actors. That's pretty easy to justify because who here has access to increasingly powerful AI systems? Anyone? Anyone in the room? All of you do. And if you all do, if we all do, malicious actors have the same access. This stuff is not hard to get at anymore. And it's getting more sophisticated with time. So yes, and I can get to this a little bit more if you like, but yes, there's still some flaws in it. But we have to be thinking a few years in advance. So that's an important point. Commercial AI systems could make the kind of supply chain attacks I described early on by malicious adversaries more dangerous. So it's not necessarily that suddenly there's this brand new thing going on. Oh, they're attacking the supply chain. No, that was a thing. This was already there. We talked about that. But could they use an AI to make themselves more effective? Yeah, probably. They could make counterfeit certifications that are much more believable than they might have been before. They could undertake sophisticated social engineering using chatbots in a way perhaps could not have been done before. And processing data from images was really hard, and it's not so hard with AI comparatively. So innovative modes of supply chain attacks are also possible. What I'm talking about is not innovative, these are things they could do before, but now they're better at it. But new things might come, and so we should be aware of that. We don't know where AI is going. I say we, and I mean, of course, the nuclear security community, but I get the feeling from the AI people, they kind of know where they think it's going, but nobody's completely sure. And so for that reason, these innovative modes could develop and be completely surprising alongside AI tech advancements. We'll come back to that later. Last slide on thinking about the risk landscape before I move on to talking about the conclusions that we'd like to really hammer home. That is data management and data security. I think anybody in here who works on cyber stuff assumed I was going to get to this because this underlies all of the rest of it. Insecure data can provide a pathway for an attack of nuclear facilities, including via the supply chain. That doesn't have anything to do with AI, right? You think. Even if only on the business side, potentially sensitive and export-controlled data has to be monitored, it has to be managed. Also, that's not about AI. Oh, yes, it is. Because if you have AI on the business side in your facility, even, and I keep saying business side for a reason because that's where it's already happening, there's a lot of sensitive data that's being processed, and that data there's sensitive data going into the AI. Do you know where that data is being stored? Do you know where that data is being kept? Do you know who's getting that data? Who owns that data? Also an interesting question. So all of that needs to be thought about when you're thinking about security of the sensitive data that you're dealing with. If you were to install predictive maintenance AI, and so AI to help a predictive maintenance system in your facility, what kind of data is it processing? Do you know where that data is? Do you know where that data is going? Do you know that how it could be hacked or leaked through the AI? Is it possible? You need to be thinking about that. So that's one thing. The other thing is your malicious actor could very well have AI help. So things that before you might have been putting on the internet and thinking, no one's going to do anything with that. Well, maybe you have a nice image of your control room that if you zoom in could reveal details about supply chain. Maybe before AI that was okay. AI can do a lot of interesting things with image processing. So I'm not saying that it will happen. What I'm saying is these are the kinds of new thoughts that you're going to have. There's just going to be, when you have AI in so many parts of our lives, there's going to be more places where sensitive data is processed, sensitive data is stored, sensitive data is managed, and that needs to be thought about, including all of its security aspects. And now, I'm just going to wrap up. This part will be a bit shorter because all I'm going to do is say, now I hope I've scared you a little bit. But we don't want to leave you just scared. That's not our job here. We want to leave you with some thoughts about, okay, so what needs to be done? We live in this world, right? Well, the first thing is proactively account for risks and benefits of AI in nuclear security. That's just it. You need to balance security concerns against the benefits of AI systems being put into facilities. What are you getting out of it? What are your risks? Secure against the risks. Make sure that nuclear security implications of AI are integrated into all sorts of guidance, regulations, and policies. Don't leave it out. All of these new capabilities need to be thought about in that context. What will it add? What will need to be changed? International organizations and others can give guidance and information on how to mitigate this impact, and it would be great to have it. I think that a lot of people would really appreciate it in the nuclear industry, in regulators. It would be great to have this guidance, this information, but also, and this is important, how AI systems could actually benefit supply chain security. Because we are in this new world, and so you think about the risks, but then also think about, okay, how can we use the same tools to make things more positive? Sharing of information, including lessons learned, is key because one country, and I'm talking about international sharing mostly, but in general, this is true. One country might have an incident and information on how they manage it that's useful to others, and so it might be good to have open channels of communication. They won't happen every day, and so that will help to figure out how to manage future incidents. And after that speech I just gave you, you're shocked that prioritize data security more than ever. Think about what's being released publicly. Think about what data is being used, where it's being stored, what's going on with it. Build capacity and awareness and train. That's number 2. People don't know much about AI yet. That's okay, because it's moving really, really fast. It's hard to know much about it. This is true in general in the nuclear security community. So build the human capacity needed to securely integrate the AI into your facilities, and the capacity you need to proactively respond. So we need to make sure that the cybersecurity people in particular, but in general security people, know what to do when they're faced with an attack on an AI in the system, or an AI-enhanced cyber attack, or another supply chain attack. And build awareness of the risks. Policymakers need to know that this is a thing they need to worry about. Regulators mostly do know that awareness needs to continue to be raised. And the nuclear industry mostly knows, but again, at the highest levels, this needs to be very clear. You need to think about AI and nuclear security, not just AI. And some tailored training for other stakeholders, I already mentioned, cybersecurity professionals could really be helpful in getting this jump started. And coming back to this beneficial side, I don't want to leave you with this AI is bad feeling. It's AI is. AI has to be managed. And there are AI systems that can be used for good, that can help cybersecurity, that can help nuclear security. And there are many beneficial uses in nuclear facilities. They just need to be securely procured, qualified, and installed. And you need cybersecurity for them that thinks about what they are. And AI in the hands of security professionals has a lot of benefits for the kind of things that I was mentioning to you, coming from a malicious actor with access to AI-enhanced capabilities. Detecting deepfakes and false credentials, AI is probably going to be better at that than people. Mapping vulnerabilities in the supply chain, we just talked about this, and also generally helping cybersecurity professionals with a lot of attacks. Keep thinking ahead. AI models themselves are going to increase the technological pace of change of AI and other technologies. This isn't the end. This may seem like the new next big thing, but it's a next big thing that will make other challenges appear and other solutions. It's just going to make the change happen more. The current security situation, you can't just leave it there and say, okay, we've dealt with today's AI, no problem. Yeah, you got to think about tomorrow's AI. So we need more research to alert of emerging concerns. And the last point I have before I will turn back to Elena is this is not the last disruption. And governments in the nuclear industry need to be ready for the next thing that will be coming. So here, I'm going to leave this slide up. You can reach our report here. You can download it anytime. I just quickly want to add, though, my thanks to everyone who helped putting this together. We had so many fantastic interviews to understand this space. We had a wonderful workshop. There was just a lot of people's work that went into this, and I just want to express genuine appreciation for all of that and for the fantastic support of Global Affairs Canada throughout every bit of this project. So thank you all very much, and back to Elena.
Thank you, Sarah. Really appreciate it. You made my job easier in terms of thanking Canada, Global Affairs again. But I still want to return, you gave like a big bird's eye view of the report and various issues, and you've spoken already quite a bit about nuclear security risks and threats related to AI, and particularly in the supply chain. But could you provide us a little bit more kind of concrete example what it means? And what are the main things that you're concerned about? And this is the question to both of you. Why don't we start?
Okay, well, should I start and then you can add a little bit to it? I've been talking a lot, but there's so much here to talk about. Well, there are a lot of examples of this. There are a lot of examples of criminals and other actors infiltrating supply chains, nuclear and otherwise, digital, physical. I've seen a couple of briefings by Interpol on exactly this. And there's also real risk that this could be enhanced by AI. I mentioned deepfakes, AI-generated certificates, deep supply chain mapping, going through lots and lots of data that's hacked, leaked, or OSINT. But also, here's a good one for you, and I've heard of this recently, lone wolf criminals. So if you have a low-skilled cyber criminal living alone maybe, angry, wanting to do something disruptive, or just make some money, AI might enhance their capabilities. There could be a lot of those. And so what you've done is you've got a lot of low-level criminals who now are much better. You've also got organized crime getting better. This is a real overload for your cybersecurity professionals. Before they had a lot of people they could get rid of quickly. Now they've stepped up. Now there's a lot of real threats to be dealt with. Could also have, and I mentioned a lot of the other threats. I just wanted to really stress that one. But a bottom line is you've got to manage these new challenges with AI, especially in facilities. You just have to manage the ones that have nuclear security consequences, take a graded approach, know what you're dealing with. Supply chain is going to be a big part of this because we know so many attacks are coming through it. And I'm going to steal something from a colleague of mine who gave me this great little one-liner that she's using all over the place in her papers. Install your AI securely, keep track of the supply chain, and what I stole from her is verify, then trust. Don't trust, then verify. Mara, do you have anything to?
Yeah, I want to echo some of the challenges that Sarah already highlighted, but I think one of the main challenges is exactly associated with malicious actors' use to have AI-enhanced social engineering techniques. So with the social engineering techniques, they can get access to crucial information and then disrupt and compromise your system. It could be access to crucial supply chain information. And we all are seeing this in our everyday lives. It's not unique to the nuclear sector, but it could have real repercussions for the nuclear sector with phishing emails, text messages, telephone calls with voice cloning and voice skimming, and deepfakes just becoming much more authentic, much more genuine, much more convincing. And in addition, they're becoming more difficult to detect, even to the trained eye, and even to an AI that might potentially help detect this. This is still an area of research, and it's a real concern. And on top of that, you then have the human aspect in all of this. So with AI-enhanced social engineering tactics, you're looking at manipulating human behavior, changing human behavior, and how will the human in all of this react to that? And I think that's a real consideration for the nuclear sector, where insider threats are real and insider threats can be enhanced in this particular area when you're dealing with sensitive data and you have an increased vulnerability of that data being stolen, shared unintentionally, or otherwise leaked.
Why don't we build on that, what you just said, including on the insider and threats and social engineering, as well as associated risks? How can we ensure that the nuclear force is ready to adapt to AI-enabled world? And not only in terms of how to prevent the, misuse and malicious actors, but also in general, how to use these technologies. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts in this regard, and just starting with one of the things that Sarah had mentioned as well, AI is coming. It's already here, and the nuclear sector is not immune to it. So a recent survey with large US financial firms had indicated that 61% of those US firms are planning on using AI for some tasks that are currently done by humans within the next year. So that's a rapid pace. So the first thing is everyone, including in the nuclear sector and even those resistant to it, need to be amenable to use AI tools and engage with the AI tools. How are we going to do that? How are we going to be ready for this? Sarah already highlighted it. A key takeaway from our report is obviously training, capacity building, and awareness raising are essential about what a malicious actor could potentially do with an AI tool, but also what type of AI tools are being integrated into your nuclear facilities. This is essential across all departments and a range of stakeholders. And most importantly, it's not a one-off. It's a continuous process. It's not, oh, I've had my AI training for the year, check, I'm done. No, it needs to be a continuous process because, as Sarah also alluded to, the technology is constantly evolving, it's constantly improving, its capabilities are getting better, and that at a very fast pace. So we just really need to keep ahead of the trends that are out there. Speaking of AI tools that are integrated actually into a nuclear facility, I think it's really important that it needs to be a gradual process. And it also needs to be a transparent process. I think in approaching it that way, you'll help overcome both organizational, cultural, and even generational challenges that might arise with accepting these tools, adopting these tools, and properly using these tools in your nuclear facilities. All that to be said, really bringing in the human aspect, and I know this has been said in lots of sessions already that people have probably attended or you've heard in the media, over-reliance on these systems is something we have to be aware of. If a software engineer relies on AI systems to assist them with coding, there is the potential that that code can actually become less secure over time. So just being aware of over-reliance and also understanding that even though, especially in critical infrastructure such as the nuclear sector, if we're looking at integrating these tools also for nuclear supply chain or procurement, even the thorough testing that these tools will have to undertake and the qualification processes, we'll never be able to fully understand the logic and how it derives at its output. So there will always be some black box involved. And we also will never be able to test against all possible scenarios. There are just unknowns that exist that we may not be able to foresee. And one particular unknown for me is exactly how the human is going to react. How will the human and machine interaction take part? And I'll wrap it up, but just to add to this, I think for the nuclear sector, the human element is crucial because the nuclear sector, just like with any critical infrastructure sector, you have people that are under great pressure to perform. And once you integrate these AI tools, even though they might be there to assist, they actually could have an adverse effect where you're looking at individuals who are overloaded, overwhelmed. Maybe they start questioning their own competencies, and it could lead to an increase in human error. And so I think there are a lot of things that we need to think about. I think further research needs to go into human cognition and human-machine interaction, and above all, the capacity building, awareness raising, and training for not only AI systems being installed into nuclear facilities, but potential malicious attacks enhanced by AI tools.
Really good points, Mara. Yeah. Yeah, but, well, another question that I have actually is, you, Sarah, gave a couple of examples on data that is used, and when you were talking about the security of data and different concerns about the data, could you give us a little bit more, to talk a little bit more about these issues and give us some examples of the data that we're concerned about?
No, I'd be happy to, because I think it's a bit ambiguous sometimes. You think about data, you're not quite sure what that means. It's an abstract idea. So I'm talking really about two broad categories here. One is data used as input to or that comes as an output from an AI system that has been intentionally installed in a facility. It can be sensitive, as I think I said a bunch of times, even if it's only on the business side. But let's give an example that's relevant to supply chain. So in procurement, say it's being used to help fill out some bunch of paperwork. That seems like it could be helpful, actually. But is some of the info that's being then learned by the AI useful to a malicious actor? Okay, so maybe that's all on your internal network, is what you're saying. So it's fine. Well, okay, that's great, but where is that data stored? Is it on site or is it uploaded to the cloud? What is the AI you're using? And if it's on the cloud, where is physically that cloud server? Is it vulnerable to hacking? Do you know? So these are the kind of questions you have to follow back, even more. And this goes beyond the kind of nuclear security we're talking about. Is it in your country? Is there a data sovereignty law you need to be thinking about? Are there export control laws you need to be thinking about? You need to just walk through all these questions. So there's a lot to be thought about. And I was taking that concrete, simple example of you're using it to fill out some paperwork internally on your internal network. But still. The other is, of course, data made available to a malicious actor. That could be via leaks, it could be via hacking of your systems, or someone could just be putting it on the internet just because they never thought about how it could be added up with a bunch of other information. And a human being maybe couldn't make all the connections, but an AI might. So AI models is important here. They're increasingly capable, and not just to use them for what I use them for, which is, I only have onions and cheese in my house, what am I gonna eat? They do more than that. They pick out detailed information from images, as I said, from videos. They sift through information on the internet. And they still hallucinate, but they're getting better. They're still not that reliable. So when I'm talking about this, there's probably some out there who are going, I don't trust ChatGPT to do anything. That's true. They actually have a pretty low error rate compared to a lot of others. So let me start by saying that. Or I don't trust Meta to do this for me. Okay, fine. But these are getting better. The hallucination rates are going down. Whether that hits a plateau or not, I'm not qualified to say, but I think it's worth thinking what happens if they don't. What happens if it keeps getting better? So, I don't know, Mara, do you have anything to add? I know you've been thinking a lot about this.
Yeah, maybe just to add on the kind of malicious actors' use of information and coming back to the human element that I alluded to before. It's amazing how much information you can get from a single picture posted on social media. Let's say there's one single picture of you inside a nuclear facility and behind you are the emergency exits to the nuclear facility. That alone doesn't seem like a big deal, but someone could really use that information to manipulate it. Look to the nuclear supply chain. What if behind you is a binder where on the label it has one of your main vendors and it says contracts? That is a key crucial piece of information that someone can then run with and do further research using OSINT capabilities. So do you really know what information is being shared via social media? Do you know what information is being shared via messenger apps? Do you really know what information is on the internet? So something that is actually a really good exercise that I myself actually should probably do as well is doing a digital audit of the information that is already out there on the internet that you may or may not be aware of, and looking at that information, especially together, collectively, to see what kind of risks you already have to your nuclear supply chain, how you can mitigate those, and how you can protect the data that fortunately is not already out there that you definitely want to keep close. So just wanted to add that there, as well as highlight that obviously social engineering tactics enhanced by AI as well as insider threat pose a real danger to data security as well.
There is a lot of data kept in the nuclear facility, not only just personal data or contractors and other things. Whew, many things to think about it, but you also ended your presentation on kind of an uncomfortable note that's like, we're grappling in what to do with the AI, nuclear security, supply chain, but it's not the last thing. There's some things that may be coming that we have to think about even now. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that point?
I mean, I wish AI was the end. If that's reassuring, it's not at all. I really wish it was. I hear you. Because it's taking the nuclear security community, and I think the entire world, a while to really get comfortable at all with the possible implications of AI, to get a grasp on what they even might be. And AI is shifting and changing and improving and gaining new capabilities, new strengths. As I said, maybe it's leveling off. I've personally, and this is personal, I'm not really convinced that artificial general intelligence is right around the corner and we're all going to be, there's a super intelligence just waiting to take us over. But what is clear is it is gaining more capability, more autonomy. That's a huge thing. If it's autonomous, that matters. More accuracy. Said the hallucinations are dropping. How far they drop is anyone's guess. People are talking about agentic AI that goes back to the autonomy. It's interacting too with more tech, and I think was the main point I made at the end. Researchers using AI to get to more technological advancements. They're using it for fluid dynamics. I used to study fluid dynamics. It was a pain. It's a great thing to do. It's going to move things forward. You could use it for modeling of nuclear reactor cores. You could use it for quantum computing. Then, of course, there's links to other technologies. There is additive manufacturing. So it just decides it wants a part and then tells the 3D printer, make that part without any human in the loop. It can be done. Drones, robotics. So it comes back to all of this autonomy. The future AI can be used by defenders, as we were talking about throughout, but also attackers. You just need to think about this, and we need to be flexible, I think is the only thing. Don't think that what we're dealing with today is what we'll deal with in 10 years, and be open to the world just not being the same. And what I want to emphasize, the nuclear security community needs to think about this before we are surprised, not after. That's not going to help. The systems for regulation and implementation of nuclear security measures were mostly done before any of this technology started changing quite this fast. We saw it changing with cybersecurity. That was already hard to deal with. It's going to just get more and more and more. And there need to be adaptations in the regulations, the way that they are implemented, and all just to ensure a high level of security for this. The bottom line is the change is going to move faster than we think. So I'm sorry to not say something more reassuring to all of you to end this.
Yeah, well, definitely the pace of change nowadays is like increasing with every day and every hour, so to speak. But I'm really grateful for you giving that overview of the issue and the report. And now is the time for you to ask any questions if you have. I'll turn first to the audience here. Don't be shy. Please, Carolina, could you bring the... Please use the microphone. Please introduce yourself.
Okay.
We appreciate if your questions are short.
Oh, okay. Harvey Zoden. I used to work in the Carter administration, and now I'm writing a book about China. It's almost finished. Gary Marcus, who's a professor, was a professor at NYU, says that you really can't trust AI, and you've alluded to the hallucinations and things like that. So I don't know why you don't put more emphasis on that, because it seems to me that if you take the fact that, okay, AI is getting better, but it hallucinates and does a lot of unreliable things and subject to manipulation of how it was trained and all that, it seems to me that if you don't have a firm foundation, and that's the AI, that it's difficult to do all the things that you said need to be done, all of which I agree with. So one of the things that Gary Marcus told me was he thinks that this generation of AI probably has to be replaced by another one. And he thinks it only will take something like CERN in Switzerland for that to happen. So I'm just curious about your reactions to that. Thanks very much for a very interesting presentation.
Thank you. Well,
Well,
you want to take that question?
I will take that question. I first want to say thank you for a very interesting question. And the first thing I'm going to say is part of the reason we didn't get into that so much is because we're trying to give a very shortened version of the full discussion that's in the report. We still don't go into it a lot because there's two different issues here. One is the generative AI and the kinds of chatbots and things we're seeing commercially available and the hallucinations, yeah? That's one thing. That's not necessarily the same kind of technologies that are being looked at to actually put into facilities and beneficial uses. They're more often predictive AI applications. And with those, then what we talk about further in the report is how to build trust and what are the unique aspects. One thing that I think I could highlight for you and for all of you is we talked to a lot of people about this and concluded this is building this trust in an AI tool that you have in a facility for a good reason is evolutionary, not revolutionary. Because we're talking about, again, these predictive tools. We're not talking about, again, a chatbot that's been fed on the whole internet mostly. And a lot of software tools that are already used in various facilities and lots of industry uses, it's not like anybody can take those apart. It's not like their supplier is going to say, hey, yeah, we'll tell you exactly what all the source code here is. So there's a certain amount of trust building and verification that has to be done, and there are methods in place for verification and validation of software tools. They'll need to be adapted. AI is a little bit harder. There's a lot of more questions. But I think it can be done in the applications we're talking about here. As for the malicious actors using this stuff, this is going to be a free-for-all. They may use it, they may trust it. I mean, we can't control that. And so that's going to be more of an open question, but I don't think we can control whether they used it based on whether it's trustworthy. So, yeah. I hope that was helpful. Mara, do you have more to?
Yeah, I might just add a little bit there. So trustworthy AI is an active area of research. It's a question that a lot of people are grappling with. But at the end of the day, at the moment, there's going to be a trade-off between trustworthiness, and it will be what you decide to accept, and also the level of risk you decide to accept when you're looking at inserting these tools into your nuclear facility. So at the moment, it seems models that are trained for accuracy tend to underperform in terms of adversarial robustness. Is that the trade-off you want to accept? And what is the level of risk you're willing to accept for that exact application in the use case? So this is an active area of research, I just wanted to emphasize, and there are trade-offs that need to be made because, as alluded to, completely breaking everything down, I just don't think that's going to be possible. From the malicious actor side, there was a really interesting report recently released by NIST on trustworthiness and responsible AI, and there was a really interesting quote that I'm just going to read because I think it is something for us all to think about when you look at the malicious actor side of it, and that is, as long as the model has any probability of exhibiting undesired behavior, there exists prompts that can trigger that behavior. So it's not reassuring, but there is a level of risk that we have to accept here.
Even more scary than before. Other questions? Please.
Benno Farkas from Siemens Energy. We have no nuclear background, but we are interested, of course, suppliers of the conventional island. So thanks for the presentation. And I would like to go to, there was a lot of mentioning of artificial intelligence in supply chain in projects. And I have a specific project background with different functions in the project. And the question is, you talked about AI in a passive way, so we have to, or it should be done, but breaking it down to a project reality, who is responsible for AI? Who should do it? And I say it with the background that when you talk about quality, so I'm in the quality department, normally it says who is responsible for quality? It's everybody, but still there is a quality manager in the project. With the cybersecurity, we have the same. We are now gaining up speed, and there are cybersecurity responsibles in the organization, in project teams. And with the discussion at the moment, I'm thinking of, will we need a kind of AI responsible, and what's the definition or what's the background this person would require to fulfill all these requirements?
So this is also a very good question. And in some ways, look, this report is not meant to answer those because those are questions that need to be answered, and especially you're not in the nuclear industry, by each operator, by each industry. Like these are the kinds of specific solutions that you choose to put in place to ensure quality control. That's going to be on you. So it is, in a lot of ways, it's on the operator of the particular facility to put good quality control in place. Now, of course, there is a regulator, particularly I can tell you in the nuclear field, there is a nuclear regulator who goes through and makes sure that that is done adequately. And so when we're talking about responsibilities, it's the operators, the person who is installing this, the facility operator is responsible for making sure it's done in a responsible way, ultimately, but they are then responsible to the regulator who is going to come and check on them. They're going to have to create some kind of rules, of regulations, and also a system of inspections to make sure that all of this is happening the way it should be happening. So that is also someone who's responsible. The regulator is going to be responsible for putting into place the rules, the regulations, the enforcement, and so on. Policymakers need to also be making policies to underscore all of this so that the regulators can build on that. So I feel like it was written intentionally openly because there are so many actors with so many different responsibilities. On a project level, that's going to be up to really the operator there. Does that mostly get to what you're saying? Yeah.
Okay. I don't see hands in the room, so we'll switch to the questions coming from our virtual audience. Louis, could you please?
Absolutely. So there's been quite some interest, a few questions on the presentation. One of them is, could you elaborate on the possibility of generative AI versus predictive AI being used in sort of countering the risk of AI in the nuclear supply chain? So how could AI be used to predict and preempt sophisticated supply chain attack pathways? There are two questions that touch on regulation. One of them is sort of more explorative in terms of what is the regulatory approach at the moment. And then also, is there a risk that in the absence of transnational regulation of common standards for regulating AI, at a time when nuclear energy is expanding, that this might compound the risks that AI could pose for nuclear facilities if there is just national regulation and no common approach to that problem. And I'll read another question, and I'm going to read it because I think it'll benefit from a detailed readout. So given the growing trend of IT-OT convergence, so IT and then operational technology convergence across the energy sector, is the risk of integrating these technologies significantly higher, especially in nuclear facilities built before the introduction of digital technologies? So if secure by design principles are more challenging to apply in these legacy systems, how can we ensure their secure use? So essentially, I think touching on how do we make AI safe for use in legacy systems?
Oh, great questions. Thank you, Louis.
Okay. That's a lot of questions.
That's a lot of questions.
And we have very little time left, so I hope that we will be forgiven if we don't get into exceedingly deep detail, because that's a lot of very good, very detailed questions. Beginning with generative AI and predictive AI and how they could be used to preempt attacks. Look, predictive AI and generative AI are two different kinds of AI. Not everyone is going to be fully familiar with what they are. Generative AI creates novel, creative outputs. Predictive AI predicts something based on previous patterns. They do different jobs, and so they're used in different places to do different things. Now, I actually don't want to go into a list. I'm not sure I've even got anything like a full list in my head. I know I don't, of ways that they could be used to preempt attacks on the nuclear supply chain. I think one is you could use a generative AI, as I said earlier, to understand what your supply chain looks like. That would be step one. If you can map a little bit deeper backwards into it and figure out where there are some suppliers that then you do all your background research, also possibly using, in part, a generative AI, to figure out more about each of those suppliers who seem most questionable. Do some interviews. Maybe they're too far even back in your supply chain to do some interviews, but you'll be able to pinpoint perhaps spots that you want to watch more than others. You could also perhaps use it as part of your verification and assessment, but that's another can of worms we shouldn't be opening here. So, Mara, I'm just going to run through these, and then if it's okay if you add. The regulatory approach at the moment, honestly, I've talked to a lot of regulators in the course of this project, and I don't think there is a regulatory approach to this, particularly on the security side. There is a really, really good tripartite paper from the Canadian nuclear regulator, the US nuclear regulator, and the British nuclear regulator about the use of AI in nuclear facilities. That's about as far as I've seen much of anything at this point. Because there are some applications, but as I said, they're mostly business side. We haven't yet seen a lot of AI being integrated. There's mostly talk, and it's talk from the industry. They're going to these regulators asking about it. So I think they're still working their way out. Even that tripartite paper, I should go back, it focused on safety, it focused on applications. It had a little on security, but not very much. The IAEA is also working on some things. There's a little bit about security. There's not yet very much. So I don't think there is at this point a regulatory approach. I think different regulators are trying to sort their way through this. In an absence of common standards, could this be dangerous, especially in a nuclear renaissance? Well, yeah. But it would be good to have common standards. That would be fantastic. I think that tripartite paper is a good step forward. And it would be, the IAEA, I know, is working on trying to start conversations, bring people on the same page. I think that's going to be fantastic if it needs to get further. Then the last question was very, very detailed. Perhaps before we get to that, Mara, do you want to comment on the first three, and then we'll wrap up with this one?
You covered a lot of things. I think just looking at how to use AI to help prevent nuclear supply chain attacks, I just want to highlight that it's really difficult. And one of the main difficulties is if your malicious actor is also using AI tactics to infiltrate your supply chain, sometimes it would be difficult because it's the same data distribution. We don't know how the models are going to react. So one thing here that I would say is that you want to look at mitigations before you introduce AI systems, at least into your own nuclear facility. And also when you're looking at the supply chain, customer-supplier interactions are really important. But there are examples where even AI-enhanced photos have slipped through the cracks, even through video interviews that have led to attempted malicious activity. So maybe we even need to take it a step further, and you need to consider having your cybersecurity expert or procurement experts working directly on site in certain cases with the development of certain products. This is not particular to how AI can help mitigate those challenges, but just things to think about within the AI realm as you're looking at nuclear supply chain.
Yeah. And I think just adding that before I go to the last question, you made a really good point about AI is better. So if you have a deepfake photo or you have a fake certification, I think I mentioned this a couple of times, AI will be much better at trying to search these out than most people. So that is a definite use in the supply chain for an AI. And generative at that. The trend of digitizing, I might say, legacy old nuclear power plants. Yeah, I mean, it is being done. I think the current, and I may be a little bit off, I think it's 40% right now of operating nuclear power plants have digital instrumentation and control systems. Most of those were, of course, many of them were backfitted. And that trend is continuing because it's just nicer to have a digital instrumentation and control in your system. The risk of trying to then fold in an AI on top of something that was not built for it, yeah, I think that the question is a really, really good one. It probably is going to create security vulnerabilities more than if it was designed for it. Just like pretty much anything, if you back engineer it, you create more security problems than if you did it initially. It just is going to have to be thought about and whether the benefits are going to end up being worth those risks. I think it's going to be an individual case-by-case basis. That's why I don't want to make any big sweeping statements. Everyone who is looking at taking a legacy, older nuclear power plant, upgrading it, first digitizing it, then adding in AI systems for certain functionalities, they'll have to just think about which functionalities are the most useful and whether it's worth it. And they're going to have to talk to the regulators. Like, there's going to be a lot of conversation, I think, around this in the next few years because we just have so many aging nuclear power plants. So it's a really interesting question. I am interested myself in seeing how this all goes, but I think it's going to be it's new, and it's also going to be so specific to each and every use case, each and every decision of what they want to do, how they want to upgrade it, what they're putting this into. Again, it's going to be fascinating. The future's rich.
That's true.
That is very true. And I wish we had more time, but I think it's probably a good moment to wrap up. I'll just say that it's a fascinating discussion, and particularly with regards to the last question, kind of triggered a memory. I was in Mexico a couple of years ago at the research reactor, and we were in the control room looking and first and have a briefing there, and they were saying, "You're a lucky one. This is the last year we have our analog system. Next year it's all going to be digital." So we are moving everywhere in our life to digitalization. And as you mentioned, cybersecurity and thinking about digitalization and Internet of Things and everything else that's coming, and now on top of it, AI. That you know, we're still dealing with some initial issues, but now it's going to be much faster, and that nexus between the two is another one to really reckon with. But before we end, I'm going to give you each 30 seconds, up to a minute, to say anything you want to finish your presentation or add something to the discussion.
Mara, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. Just very briefly, I think the main thing when thinking about this nexus is to have caution when looking at integrating AI into nuclear facilities. It's not impossible. There are ways, but we just need to think about the risks and look at mitigation strategies.
I think that's pretty much what I want to say. I would just add, keep thinking about the future, yeah? And keep thinking about, a lot of this is going to happen on very small scales, right? We're talking big scale here. We're making big policy style pronouncements. But as you brought out in your question here, a lot of those decisions are going to be made individually by a project manager, by people assigned to quality assurance. And so a lot more needs to be done. We've given some broad outlines of things to look at. There needs to be more work. This is not the end. This is we're hoping will inspire others to start digging in and getting deeper into the details of what needs to be done to deal with this nexus. So thank you very much.
Thank you both. And but please join me in thanking Sarah and Mara. But also, once again, want to extend the thanks to Global Affairs Canada and to all contributors to the kind of brain power and thinking and experience into the report. Everybody, the QR code is there. It's on our website. Thank you very much for joining us today. All the best.